The current status of Bitcoin and other open blockchains, how can users who purchase their BTC on an exchange exposing all of their anonymity protect their privacy and anonymity, especially when governments have very sophisticated tools such as chain analysis? Should there be infrastructure and a paradigm shift on how users switch their assets from fiat to crypto? It's a great question. Right now, Ermin, it's actually very difficult to protect your privacy because the fiat system has all of these rules that tie all transactions to identity. Basically, the fiat system is designed to be a surveillance machine. And so if your on-ramp, if you like, if your entrance into the crypto space is through the surveillance fiat system, then you start your journey under full surveillance. And as a result, your privacy is going to be severely compromised. Now, this isn't something that is necessarily the fault of exchanges. Exchanges are trying to work as a bridge between fiat and crypto, and fiat is a surveillance system. So they can't not do the surveillance that's required by governments around the world when touching the fiat system. So how do you maintain your privacy? How do you maintain anonymity? How do you protect your human rights, your ability to transact without everything you do being under the scrutiny, absent any suspicion or wrongdoing? How do you protect yourself? Well, one way is to think about how you get to the crypto economy in a different way. And I've talked about this before, but I think it's worth emphasizing again. And that is, if instead of buying crypto, you earn it by giving your labor, your services, effectively by selling products or services that you would sell otherwise, doing your job and earning your income in crypto, then it's not an exchange. It doesn't touch fiat, and as a result, it's not part of the surveillance and reporting system. Of course, you have to report your income, or you may choose not to, but you should report your income and all of the other requirements of the law. But you don't have to report which crypto address you received your income on. So you have a much higher degree of privacy when you do private transactions between individuals rather than dealing with a regulated exchange, for example. Another way is to think about various privacy services that exist that help you. Once you have crypto that you've acquired on an exchange, the address that you receive that crypto, for example, by withdrawing it from the exchange, is tainted. What does that mean? That means that the moment you did a withdrawal, the exchange will have associated your identity, which they've recorded, with the address you sent the crypto to. They will either assume that that's someone you're paying if they have information of that address belonging to a merchant through other systems that are under surveillance, or they'll assume that that address belongs to you. As part of the deal that these exchanges have with various analytics firms in order to support what they call Know Your Customer, KYC, and anti-money laundering regulations, AML, they will actually send information on every transaction to the analysis firms together with the identity that they have. And in return, they'll get some kind of score, a risk score that says whether they should allow or not that transaction. So this is a very dirty deal, if you like, whereby in order to receive score information about the risk of a transaction from a KYC AML perspective, the exchanges are effectively forced to send all identifying information about all incoming and outgoing transactions to the analytics firms, which means that the exchanges then become a giant surveillance machine. This also applies to all of the merchant processing, centralized points that perhaps are building e-commerce shops and things like that, or converting crypto into fiat for merchants. Again, in order for them to be able to comply with the regulations and get a risk score or an AML score on any single transaction, they have to send all transactions with associated identity to the analytics firms. So the moment you do a withdrawal, your receiving address has been tainted and associated with you. And at that point, the only way to break that association is to do some transactions between your own wallets that will obfuscate the sources of those funds. Now, depending on your jurisdiction, that may be perfectly legal or it might not be. And I'm not going to give you legal advice as to whether you should or shouldn't do that. Simply know that there are tools out there that will allow you, in places where that is legal, to add a layer of privacy to your transactions by, for example, mixing cryptocurrency transactions with your wallets and other wallets, which in some jurisdictions is perfectly legal and in some others is not. Will a Tether collapse lead to such a fierce bear market that it kills off Bitcoin? And will decentralized atomic swaps and BISC be too late and weak to save the day? You know, I haven't really studied what's happening with Tether, but I do know that it is a centralized and centrally managed system, and that represents custodial risks, counterparty risks, like any other centralized and centrally controlled system. Having lived through a few very, very big crises in Bitcoin, I'm really not fearful of a fierce bear market that could kill off Bitcoin. I really don't think that that can happen for a variety of reasons. One reason is that most people who get into Bitcoin today don't realize how big a deal the collapse of Mt. Gox was. We're talking about a time when there was only one exchange, when that exchange was responsible for price setting, and when that exchange was responsible for the vast majority of all of the exchange volume. And when it collapsed suddenly, catastrophically, and with a loss that was a staggering amount of money as a percentage of the total amount of Bitcoin in circulation. And Bitcoin didn't die. It was the first and only time I was afraid that this might really knock Bitcoin back by a long time, or even potentially stop it in its tracks and force us to reboot the currency and start something new. And when it didn't happen, I realized that Bitcoin is more resilient than I thought. And then I started thinking about what my reaction would have been if Bitcoin had dropped precipitously back to double digits or even single digits in value against the dollar. And I realized that what I would probably do is buy all of them with whatever cash I had. And then I realized that everybody else would be thinking the same, or at least a very large number of people who had seen that this experiment was working and believed in it would think the same. This idea of buy the dip isn't always investment advice or good investment advice. In fact, in some cases, it's terrible investment advice. It's catching a falling knife, as they say in investment circles. But there are some people who believe in this project so strongly that if they see an opportunity to get back in at a much lower cost basis, they will. And some of these people have a lot of money now. And so they will, what they consider a buying opportunity is much higher than what I would. In fact, I recently saw a tweet that was kind of funny, which said, what would you do if Bitcoin dropped to zero? And someone responded, it wouldn't, because if it dropped to 1 penny, I could buy all of them for $168,000, and I would. That kind of attitude at different price points means that I don't see that scenario. Could a collapse of something like Tether set us back by a significant period of time? Yes. I mean, we keep seeing these things happen, and they're the result of centrally controlled, centrally managed custodial systems, and Tether is one of those. The same thing could be said for the recent massive theft at Coincheck, which was $500 million worth of NEM and a significant amount of Ripple. We will continue to see these centralized systems introduce counterparty risk, and every now and then that counterparty risk is going to turn into an actualized loss.